Super excited to have Ryan Hamner of the Chronicle down there in Duke joining us. Ryan, thanks so much for taking the time.
AJ, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we love talking Duke and Syracuse, whether it's basketball or football. And Ryan, this is a Duke team that last year had an excellent season. Only four losses. They had a really bad bowl loss, but outside of that, a really impressive year two under head coach Manny Diaz. How excited were you for that season? And was that a surprise last season? Those 9 wins.
Yeah, I mean, 9 wins is definitely something that no one's going to be upset about, especially in someone's first season. And I think everyone down here was really surprised. And I think, Manny did set a really high bar for himself, especially now in year two. And we already see that with some tough non-conference losses that, it's not always sunshine and rainbows.
What went wrong? You mentioned those non-conference losses. Played really good teams, Illinois and Tulane. What went wrong for Duke in those two defeats?
Yeah, it was mainly self-inflicted errors. Looking back at Illinois first, I mean, four really massive turnovers that changed the momentum of that game. And I think statistically, Duke had, the art advantage through most of the game and then definitely got lopsided towards the fourth quarter. But just not protecting the ball, making key mistakes defensively that have not really been characteristic of Duke teams in the past. And then we saw that again in Tulane. Just the rushing defense has not been something that I think a lot of people were, you know, expecting to be at the same caliber, and that's clearly been the case, giving up 4 touchdowns to Retzlaff, who is definitely a very good quarterback, but you know, when you give up 4 touchdowns to a single player, it's hard to end up winning the game.
Certainly. And, down there in Duke is the consensus for Manny Diaz after such a great year two that he just can't get those big wins yet because you looked at last season, you didn't beat any of the ranked teams. SMU lost, Miami lost, Georgia Tech lost as well. So is the consensus is, yeah, he can do it in the lesser games, but in these big games, and I think you can contextualize Saturday as a big game with the win Syracuse just had. That's the hump he needs to get over.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly is something people have been mentioning, but I personally don't know that it's fair. This is his second season, and he did what he needed to do last year. I don't think it's really fair to take a program that is notably never won those big games and then instantly make an impact. But yeah, you are right. Syracuse this weekend is going to be tough, especially given last week. And I don't think that um, Manny never takes any games lightly, and this certainly won't be the case again. It's a big road game, second one after the Tulane loss. And I think this is where the rubber hits the road. I think the NC State game last week showed that it's not always going to be easy and that this is a team that's going to need to fight through games. And, Syracuse with a high-powered offense is definitely going to require the defense to step up once again after last week against NC State, who had another high-powered offense. So,
Syracuse and Duke on the football side aren't that two familiar opponents. First time playing since 2020, where Duke came into the Dome and won. What is it about Syracuse that you didn't think could challenge Duke? And do you think the Duke is ready for a hostile environment, family weekend, the Dome sold out?
yeah, it'll certainly be a big test. Tulane was definitely a hostile environment, so I don't know that it'll be super new. We have a lot of experienced leaders who are used to playing in these road environments, especially in the ACC slate. So they will be prepared, and this will be, you know, quarterback Darian Minsa's first test on the road in the ACC. So it'll be exciting to see how he lives up to that moment. But what Syracuse, I think, is going to do, and we saw this last week, is their ability to stretch the field width-wise. I think Clemson's secondary was really challenged, and um, that's something that Duke is going to have to step up to again. Very, very talented secondary that has not always looked the best so far this season. And so I think this will be another key game for it to get its footing. We certainly saw that last week against a high-powered offense in NC State. Um, but again, their offensive pressure was really the difference last week. And I think another thing is that Syracuse got out to such a good lead early last week, and that was what really just made it so hard for Clemson to come back. And another thing for Duke is their inability to perform well in the first half. I think points wise, we've either been tied or barely up when it's all said and done, like at halftime. But Duke's ability to pull away in the second half has been what's taken it to that big win last week and narrowed things in other games this season. And so I think it'll be important for Duke to not let the Orange get out ahead too early because I very well could see that happening. But also just look to make the plays that it needs to on offense. In a hostile road environment, it's important to really control what you can control. And for Duke, that's going to be the short throws on offense, getting yards on the ground. And I think Duke's very capable of that. So it certainly is primed to be a good one on Saturday in the dome
Certainly
here.
will. And one thing that Duke has going for them is they're going to go up against a new quarterback for Syracuse and Rickie Collins. Steve Jelly, unfortunately, tore his Achilles against Clemson, so he's out for the season. But I want to talk about the Blue Devils quarterback, Darian Mensah. You mentioned him briefly, and he looks fun. I watch him, and it's like, oh, he's fun. He can move out of the pocket. He's got a deep ball. He's getting paid. As many college athletes are. It's still early on, but through the first four games. What have you liked from him?
I think what's been good for everyone down here to see is just his ability to complete the short throws and the ones that he needs to. That was something that the offense really lacked last season, and his ability to get yards on the ground has certainly been an added bonus, and his explosiveness as well. I mean, his deep balls have been really, really fun to watch, and the way he spread the field too. There's not one guy that he's targeting. We have a variety of receivers and ends that are um, able to catch passes and score for us. And so I think that's what is difficult about approaching this offense is that, um, there's not just one guy that you need to lock down. It's okay, well, he can hit about any pass to anybody on the field at any given time. And that's what's been really fun to watch.
Duke's rushing game is really interesting. That it's not one guy, it's not even two guys, three guys that are really taking the control for the Blue Devils on the rushing attack. What have you seen that dynamic been like so far in the first three games, and how do you expect that to go on Saturday?
It's been really fun to see. There's a variety of backs that have a lot of different playing styles. And there's not one guy that you can be prepared to stop again. Same thing as the receivers. And there's a bit of a 1-2 punch developing as the season's gone on with Anderson Castle, who's a gritty physical back who's going to pick up 3 yards and then some as he falls down. He's going to fall forward for you. And then you have an explosive guy in freshman Nate Shepard who can really tear it up and has already through 4 games emerged as he's gotten to the point where people are wondering why he's not second or first on the depth chart. And so that's another thing. You have veterans and Jacques Moore and Peyton Jones, and in the end, that's 4 guys that can get yards for you. And I don't think anyone's going to be upset about that. And for defenses, it's like, okay, how do we plan to stop this?
Now to the other skill positions, and I want to talk about this receiver, Cooper Barkate. I'm looking at him like, oh, that's a name I don't recognize, and it's because he was playing at Harvard last year, and it seems like he's kind of balling out in his first season of FBS. He's leading you guys in receiving yards. He had a bit of a quiet game against NC State, but those first 3 games, I mean, he actually got a touchdown against NC State, so maybe it wasn't that quiet. But those first 3 games, he was quite involved. Are you surprised at how much Duke has gotten him into the offense?
It's definitely been fun to see. I mean, he's a transfer guy who already has a ton of experience, but the way he's made the jump to the Power Four level has been really extraordinary. And even in fall camp, he was emerging as Mince's favorite target. And I think that's just by his ability to create separation on the outside. And he's one of the prime candidates for that deep ball. But, it's certainly not just him, though. I mean, we've seen Andrew Anthony, a guy who played at Oklahoma and Michigan already, suffer some injuries, but is now getting the full experience here at Duke, be one of those guys. The tight ends are really good as well, Landon King, Jeremiah Hazley. And so we see, yes, while Barkate is the go-to guy initially, when he's locked up, that's not an issue for Minson in the offense.
Certainly. And the other thing I want to touch on before we hit to the defense and before we get into this Duke defense is Syracuse. They've put up plenty of points in their first 4 games, even against Tennessee where they lost. They still put up points. Duke, looks like an offense that puts up a lot of points. Can we all expect kind of a shootout come Saturday?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say, especially due to the Syracuse quarterback,
Yeah.
topic. And Jelly was so fun to watch. Um, I think a lot of us down here were really looking forward to seeing two of the explosive quarterbacks in the country going head to head. They were both top five in completions, I think, and so that was going to be exciting. And while we're sorry that he's not going to be able to play, it's certainly will pose another challenge because it's not like Syracuse lost the lead at Clemson. They were able to hold it and score again late in the game, and so. Um, that's a lot of the key pieces remain the same, and so I think it's going to be interesting to see how Duke is able to respond to having a different game plan than maybe they initially expected.
Now going back to the defense, or going over to the defense, Duke has allowed points to every single team, even 17 to Elon. Are you confident that if needed, this defense can get stops to win the game if the game's on the line, or are you kind of afraid that this Duke defense might crumble and cause a loss for a couple of games?
I would say that is the main point of concern for a lot of us down here is that just how many points we've given up already. That's not really something that happened last year. And again, a lot of it's in the first half. We're letting teams go up early on us and making it a little bit harder for ourselves. And the defense certainly has moments where they've responded. And I think a lot of things have gone our way too. It's not exclusively on skill. And that is a point of concern, I would say, is definitely um, the defense right now. But I think every game they're getting a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more locked in. We knew NC State was going to put up a lot of points on us. I don't think that was really any surprise. But it was good to see them make critical stops down the stretch, especially on defense and special teams as well. Um, a real point of concern, though, is linebacker Nick Morris is going to be out for the rest of the season. He was our Mike guy that went down in the first half against NC State, and so we're going to have a younger guy, Luke Margot, step up, and that's a key position for any team is going to be the Mike linebacker. And so, while a lot of the key pieces remain the same, VJ Anthony, Trey Freeman, those guys are going to be as good as they can be. Chandler Rivers on the outside. Um, it is. I'm going to be interested to see how well Duke can respond on defense this weekend.
And then looking at some of the players, Vincent Anthony Jr., he leads the ACC in sacks with five. Have you been surprised by how good he's got off to this season?
No, not really. He was a guy last year who was already emerging as one of the best players on that line, and with another year, he's going to be even better. And so, it's exciting to see him get the numbers that we knew he was capable of, and we'll see what he can do again on Saturday.
Certainly. And the last one I want to touch on before we let you go, you mentioned it at the start of this, that Duke, they're not the premier football program. They're not, big in getting wins or anything like that. And I think the same could be said for Syracuse, until last year. I think the standard with football has kind of switched back to what it was many years ago, to where this program wants to be a premier program and get big wins like they just did against Clemson on Saturday. And that's why they have a coach like Fran Brown, who they really feel can put this team in a national spotlight. From a Duke side, with Manny Diaz, is that something this program is trying to do? Is to really get this football program back in a national spotlight and competing for in an ACC title, which outside of Florida State, this conference is pretty wide open.
Yep, Manny has really transformed from what Mike Elko left to, I think, even better at this point. Getting 9 wins and a bowl game against Ole Miss, who is
Yeah.
such a high caliber program, is not something that anyone was upset by. And I think he's starting to prove that he is capable of getting the wins. The non-conference was definitely rough, but that's year two. You can't expect the best, and I think he's establishing himself here for the next few years and is priming Duke to be in position to make a run for the conference title, I think. And that might not be this year, although, like you said, the conference is wide open, and it'll be certainly interesting to see, after this week. And then, we have Clemson left on the schedule, Georgia Tech, who are teams that maybe now we feel like we can beat after not necessarily feeling that way at the beginning of the year. Um, it's never going to be an easy schedule in the ACC, which has always been one of the premier conferences of football. And I think Manny Diaz is making some of the right adjustments, the right steps to further put Duke on the trajectory in the right direction of getting to another bowl game and getting 8 wins, 9 wins in a season and making that the new standard for Duke football, which hasn't been there in the past.
Certainly. And the same can be echoed for Syracuse and Fran Brown. And I forgot to mention Miami in that ACC picture. I should definitely point out that the Hurricanes are currently the highest ranked team in the conference. So can't forget about that. Syracuse plays Miami a little bit later. Last one, was just a fun one. Do people talk about Daniel Jones a lot? Like, is that like a thing? Like, oh, look how good Daniel Jones is playing.
Yes, especially for a lot of us on staff, it's really fun to see how he's transformed now in Indianapolis. And I think my friend who drafted him as a backup on his fantasy team is like,
Yeah.
man, I knew a ball now. And it's when you look at the highlights from his time down here in Durham, I mean, he was an elite quarterback. And so we're definitely getting flashbacks to his play down here in Durham now that he's having success in Indianapolis. So that definitely is good to see.
Syracuse is going to hope to replicate something like that with Kyle McCord, who is currently on a practice squad with the Eagles. So maybe he'll get a chance later down the line. Later down the line, but yeah, every time I see Daniel Jones play, I kind of jump to not to his time with the Giants, but his time with Duke. And Ryan, we thank you so much for taking the time this morning, and we hope you have a good rest of the season covering this Duke team. It's a fun Duke team, and we really appreciate you for joining us.
Yep. Thank you guys. Good luck on Saturday.